Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about the New Deal, which was a period of time after the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression, in which the government tried to bring relief to people, recovery, reform, and unfortunately those programs had some limits. So those are our topics that we're going to be discussing today. So our president during the New Deal is Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was actually the cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, who was president during the Progressive Era when we had a lot of laws passed that helped the workers, that intended to get business under control, that provided some regulation in our nation to, basically keep the businessman from, monopolizing, controlling products too much, and to give people a little bit more protection against government and business. And so after the Great Depression, or during the Great Depression, we had really high unemployment, as much as 25%. In fact, I have a chart on that right down here. This is the employment rate during the Great Depression. It is at the first New Deal right here. It is showing that unemployment is actually a little bit higher than 35%. And it does go down some, but unfortunately the unemployment rate only gets to its lowest level at the beginning and end of World War I. So the New Deal did a lot to try to help people, but unfortunately some people believed that it actually did not go far enough. So let's talk about what it did. First of all, President Roosevelt came up with the 3 R's plan, and the 3 R's were relief, recovery, and reform. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around how to categorize the changes that the government actually instituted, the laws that they actually passed, and what category they fit into. So if your idea of these reforms or laws or changes being underneath a different category, if you put them in a different category, that's fine. And, basically there's not a lot of right and wrong in this. So I just organize them in this way. So if you put them in different categories, that's perfectly fine. There's not going to be a right or wrong on the test. But we do want you to understand that the New Deal went a long way towards changing the way that we live and our dependency on the federal government. That is the biggest change, is that people began to look to the government and expect the government to step in and fix the problem that had been created. And the problem was created by those things that we talked about, overproduction, the fact that businesses didn't reinvest and raise wages, that people didn't have enough money to go buy things, that in the end those products couldn't be sold. Businesses thus made less money. The government didn't control and support the banking system. The banks were giving out loans to people who couldn't afford them. They were allowing people to go take money, borrow money, and go buy stocks. These were policies that the government considered to be terribly risky behavior for banks. And so the government will step in to try to make some changes. And so the people began to see the government as a way to fix the problems in society and the economy. And so this is the big change going forward from the 30s forward in our history. So let's talk about the relief. Relief for people. This means jobs. Basically, people are hungry. They need paychecks. They need immediate relief in some cases. They just need money to be able to feed themselves, to stay in their homes. And so here's some of the programs that were instituted by the New Deal Congress. This isn't all of them. There's just some of them. Okay, so the first one is the CCC. This stands for Civilian Conservation Corps. So the Civilian Conservation Corps was an organization that allowed and hired single males to go and do jobs in reforestation. They would plant trees, they would drain swamps, and basically they would improve the natural environment that we all live in. If you went and worked for the CCC, you could get 2 sets of clothes, you got 3 meals a day, but you lived in camps and you didn't get to basically stay with your family. Women were not allowed to work for the CCC, nor were married men. So it was a little bit of a limited program. The WPA Works Progress Administration. This organization went a little bit farther, and this reached out to people who were married, to people who were artists, who basically weren't able to do the manual labor required by the CCC. And so this organization sought to create jobs for those people. Some of the jobs that were created were a little bit ridiculous. For instance, counting dogs. That was a job, and you could get paid for it. And so these useless jobs, or kind of ridiculous jobs, were criticized a lot. And so Franklin Roosevelt's administration suffered a lot of criticism for some of the programs that they came up with. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this presentation, how the New Deal just really didn't seem to do the things that people thought it was going to do. Social Security Administration, though, was a wonderful program for disabled people, for women with small children. In fact, this image that you're looking at here comes from a poster promoting this Social Security Administration. It helped disabled people, elderly people, and widows who basically had small children, couldn't go out and work. So these are monetary payments. They're still around, and just a really important New Deal program that helped people. Tennessee Valley Authority was one program that really helped people in our area. This is to provide electricity for people living in rural areas, and it also provided a lot of really good paying jobs, and TVA is still around in this area. So let's talk about recovery of the economic system. So we talked about in the Roaring Twenties how the economic system is just kind of out of control. I mean, banks are just doing things they're a little bit risky. In fact, they're taking our money and investing it in the stock market, which is terribly risky. And so the Glass-Steagall Act was an act that was passed that said that banks cannot do that. They can't take your money and invest it, that they actually have to use it for purposes of lending, and there's limits to what the bank can do with your money. Unfortunately, this act was repealed in 1993, and that's why we have some of the problems with banking that we had in 2008. We'll talk about that when we get to 2008. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was created to provide insurance for banks, to insure people's money up to $5,000 in deposits. Every person who had an account in a bank, their money would be insured for that amount. If the bank were to fail, your money is protected. Today, that number is $250,000 per depositor. Next part of the New Deal was reform. We wanted to reform the economic and political system that had led to the Great Depression. So one of the things that the government tried to do was make sure that people were getting a fair wage. And so we have this Fair Labor Standards Act, which provided minimum wage, maximum hours protection for workers. Also, the AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Act, was an act that was intended to help farmers. It was very controversial because it required farmers to lower their production, in some cases to get rid of their livestock. And the idea was that if you create less of these products, the prices will go up, farmers will make more money. Unfortunately, not very popular during the time of the Great Depression when people just didn't have enough to eat. The National Recovery Administration was another organization that was supposed to help control businesses, to keep businesses from doing things that could cause economic problems. And then these actual two programs were very unpopular and criticized because people saw the government as going basically too far. And then, so the Supreme Court struck down both of these programs and they went away. And then FDR tried to do something unprecedented. He tried to cost people in the Supreme Court, some of the justices who were elderly, to force them to retire in order to get younger people on the court who would agree with his programs a little more. And then he tried to change the number of justices on the Supreme Court to get some on there that would agree with his programs. And that plan really failed. Lots of people criticized him for this. But one of the parts of the New Deal that was quite popular among several people was the repeal of the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment, which made alcohol legal. And the government made it legal basically so it could tax it and use it for revenue. So we've talked a lot about all these different programs, some of them good, some of them bad, but in the end, the New Deal kind of failed to do what it set out to do, which was recover the economy, give people jobs, reduce unemployment. It did give people jobs, but it didn't reduce unemployment to the level that people really desired, which would be, around 6% or so. And it didn't provide a lot of jobs and opportunities for minorities. It didn't reach out to women, didn't reach out to African Americans very much. The best example of this is the CCC, in which, if you're a woman or a married person, you're not going to work for the CCC. So, unfortunately, the New Deal didn't really succeed in reducing unemployment as much as people desired. In fact, you look at this chart over here and you'll see it goes down to about 20% here. This is when we get the court packing plan. The second New Deal is launched. Unemployment basically goes back up, it starts to come down, and then it really starts to come down when we enter the war economy of World War II. And so that's where I'll pick up with you later, is the beginning of World War II, and we will talk with you later. I hope you learned something about the successes and failures of the New Deal.